You can set up SSH config to handle that, right? Or you do now.
Well, I'm thinking about. I'm just trying to think how I'm supposed. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to give myself a week to think about this and see if I can figure it out, and then ask you, or either tell you that I figured it out, or ask you, because that does make sense.
Okay. Like I might have to refresh my memory on what I did, but I mean that's how I got around it. And the only reason I might have to refresh my memory is, it's been a year since I've muddled with SSH config.
Yeah, I could. I started making. At one point, nobody told me anything about. Well, I didn't know anything about SSH keys until I started doing this job, and then I wanted to make. I wanted to have an SSH key for some computers on my network here, and I thought, oh, and I think one time I used my work one for a computer, and then I was like, I don't know if I like that. And then I realized, why don't I just make new SSH keys? Like I can make SSH keys for individual, like I can make one for every computer that I have. Not that I found that delving into that, like, I know this is kind of like child's play in this world. I saw a guy who had a t-shirt that said, I like to cosplay as a sysadmin. I feel like that's me.
Hey, everybody starts somewhere. I mean,
That's
all of
true.
us ask the dumb questions at some point. I am getting to the point where I will probably finally decide to stand something else up here. Like I'm playing with some different ideas in my head, but I don't have
Oh,
anything
I'm
concrete.
curious.
Well, it's just a matter of I don't want these skills to languish, and so just debating what can I set up that I could still do some different things, play with some different things, and it be useful to me. And so I have some thoughts, but it's in the very early infancy stages of even considering what I would do. So we'll bookmark that as a follow up for when I decide what I'm going to do.
I gotcha. Like a home lab.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like I have no lab set up. Once I had no reason for it, I ripped all that shit out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, when I
Wait. Oh,
when I
no. You're
sold
talking
that.
about for when you're talking about for work, right?
Oh, I'm talking about everything. Like
Oh,
my home network has been drastically simplified. I mean, it's still overkill, but it's drastically simplified.
I kind of need to know about this, I think.
Well, when I decided to put a wall mount back up and sell that half rack that I had to free up floor space in the garage, I restructured everything. Like the only things running now are I've got the AT&T provided modem bridged to my Dream Machine running to the Firewalla, and then that running to my distribution switch, which is a new one. And that's it. I mean, the only things plugged in are the access points and, of course, the physical runs to things that already had physical runs. But the Synologies are the only things actually running on the network that are providing any services other than the Mini that I moved Plex to. Like, I have nothing running as a lab environment in any way, shape, fashion, or form.
I did not know about any of this.
Yeah. Well, so I replaced all my access points with U7 Pros. So I have 3 primary access points in the house now instead of half a dozen. One in the living room, one in the basement, and one in the upper floor. So one for each level, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I still have the in-wall access point in the living room, so that's an additional one there, but that's only because it also serves infrastructure components. And I still have the Flex access point in the garage because the U7 Pro on the office side sometimes has some issues going through those walls and some of the other stuff. I figured it was just safer to leave an access point in the garage on low transmit power just for the garage.
Do you have any do you have like a smart garage door opener or anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the one that, so after we moved in, there was a Craftsman garage door opener that the lights, if you screwed in a light bulb, it would constantly flicker and do other stuff. And still had an old chain drive mechanism. So I replaced it with a belt drive, and it's a Chamberlain one, so it has the MyQ stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, this house that we moved into, it has. I don't open the MyQ app that often, but at some point, I think MyQ is associated with my Amazon account, so that Amazon can deliver packages into the garage,
Yeah, I
which
know
is
that's a
nice.
thing that they can do.
Um, but I now can't log into my MyQ app, and it just I have no good way of resetting the password. The MyQ app still sends me notifications when my garage door opens and closes, as if I'm logged in. But to actually log in and look at the camera, I cannot.
Huh. Well, I didn't realize that they had some models with a camera. Ours is just the garage door.
Sorry, the garage door opener does not have a camera. So I think it was 2021, either 2020 or 2021. I can't remember. Whenever the Nintendo OLED Switch, when Nintendo released the OLED Switch, I bought one and I bought it from Target, and fucking driver stole it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Um, they delivered the package half opened with the only thing that was in it was they pulled out the console and the Joy-Cons, and they left everything else.
Seems like it would be awfully easy to trace.
Yeah, it does seem that way, but it'd also be super easy from porch pirates.
Yeah.
Because they didn't take a picture, because they take pictures, send them to you or whatever. I got a full I purchased it from Target. I got a full refund from Target. But it was just it was super annoying because I didn't know if I was, it was the product had been released in October. Didn't know if I could get one for Christmas for the kids. That would really suck. But here's the thing. I have such conflicted feelings about this, and this could be kind of a topic, and that is, all right, I don't know how much you make as a FedEx driver. I don't know what your life is like, and I by no means endorse stealing, especially somebody stole from me. That's it. But at the same time, I'm like, I can't not go back to the disparity between the lowest paid delivery driver and the CEO of the corporation.
Not quite where I thought you were going to go with it, but makes sense. I mean, so up to that point, there were a few comments I was going to potentially make, but there is no corporation where you can make sense of the disparity between the lowest paid individual and the C-suite. I mean, there just isn't. Right. So I think that skews the topic a little bit. What I was going to say prior to that is if you take the average delivery driver's income and compare it to the average worker in general, I would say the job is harder, longer hours, more potentially more difficult to do, but they are compensated pretty well. Just in my past experience with knowing a couple of friends who drove for one for UPS, one for FedEx, and they were both quite happy with their employment and what they made and what it provided for them and their families. That may also be an exception. It's a very, very, very small sample size. And I know that I've seen a number of advertisements talking about, drivers being paid decently, and I've seen, help wanted ads back in the day when I was looking around that would post decent numbers. I also don't know if that's skewed because they're paying, somewhat higher rates, but doing the whole part-time hours thing. So not necessarily saying that really influences overall the discussion, but it is something to point out at least that the couple of people that I know who did work full-time for the different delivery services did very much enjoy what they did and felt well compensated for what they did.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's like I said. There's no excuse. Um, there's no excuse to steal someone's stuff. Well, I say that there's
We
rarely an
can always
excuse.
come up with some exceptions.
Right, right.
Um,
And that's what I was going to say. There's you know, the only absolute is never use absolutes, right?
right.
But see, even then, you should amend that to be rare. There's almost never a reason to use an absolute.
Um, and to maybe rephrase it in more the context or the spirit that you mean is there's never typically a reason to take someone's material possessions, period, right? Like the most of the exceptions that we can make, you would think along the lines of someone starving, stealing, bread or food of some sort, water, things that you could make an argument that they shouldn't have to steal. I mean, we've certainly talked plenty about the disparity and how you combat a lot of these things is through providing basic needs. But there's also it's also really difficult not to embrace the other part of what you started out saying, which is anyone who feels the need to steal a material thing as a worker probably isn't compensated nearly well enough for the range of compensation that the company has. And that's I think how you encompass that argument.
I think that you can easily say the vast majority of Americans are not appropriately compensated. Full stop.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean that some of us aren't comfortable or are making it, but even those that are comfortable and not and making it, they're not they're not compensated appropriately.
Yeah, not at all. Especially not when you take into account all of the other things. And by that I mean things like healthcare, basic needs, shelter, the stuff that we pay exorbitant fees for.
On top of that, and this is a whole other thing, is that the people at the top are not paying their fair share in taxes either.
Let's amend that statement ever so slightly. The people at the top are not paying their fair share for taxes, but they're also not paying their fair share in resources or other stuff.
That's also true. I agree. So another example, maybe a more interesting example, I think, and that was I kind of like this example, and it has to do with fast food and how it's not as fast as it used to be. I don't think. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but it's a thing.
I would agree. Yeah.
I mean, just like a trend with maybe some maybe there's an there. Chick-fil-A might be an exception, but for all the problems that Chick-fil-A has, it seems like their business model is not one of them. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know. That being said, for the workers at a fast food restaurant to participate in capitalism, the only way that they can would be for them to go as slowly as possible. And that being that, capitalism is based on they don't have I'm trying to remember exactly how I heard this presented to me, and I might have to work through this and get corrected. But in capitalism, you have capital, and well, there's a few of us. There's a few, not even a few of us, but there are a few that have capital, and the rest of us don't. And then we could probably go into a diatribe about indentured servitude and the new slavery and so forth. But that's not where I'm going with this. Because the workers at a fast food restaurant don't have capital, they don't get to set what their wages are. The only thing they can do, they don't even get to set their hours. The only thing they can do is decide how productive they are during those hours that they're working. Because the logic here was that if you can make 10 hamburgers in 1 hour, you'll get paid the same amount as if you're making 8 hamburgers in an hour. And at that point, you're doing less work but getting the same pay, and that's their only option to participate in capitalism. Anyway, where I was going, what made me think about this at all was that in the same sense, it's like I don't really like. I have a if my order's wrong, if they're slow, the workers sometimes places restaurants are really slow because someone didn't show up because it just wasn't fucking worth it. And it's like, we all want to direct our anger at that person who didn't show up or the people who did show up but are taking a long time because they are short staffed. And it's like, no, that's not where the anger should be directed. The anger should be directed in the policies. It's not even the managers that are there. It's in the policies that the corporation has set forth and such that it's not worth showing up to work, such that you're not, that person's not compensated. And while I think these jobs are going to be replaced by robots, it's still not okay.
I think I agree. So just kind of thinking through it, I would say there is a caveat that it could be the manager, depending on whether it's a franchise or it's single store, all that kind of stuff, right? There are certain scenarios where you could have the person who potentially should be receiving the brunt of your anger accessible to you, but that's not really the focus of kind of what you're thinking through. It's more making sure you understand the difference between you in the general sense, not you specifically, but making sure you understand the difference between actually, quote unquote, speaking to the manager and as opposed to just being difficult.
Right. So I think that maybe you do bring up a good or a point about franchise owners and so forth. They do have maybe more control. So you've got you might have the manager who may or may not be the owner of the franchise. But I guess the just to make sure that this is rounded out correctly, that it's whomever is making the policy, and that could be the franchise owner, it could be the corporation, it could be a combination of both, and it could be the manager. It could be just you could have a manager who just isn't a good manager. So but it's somewhere in the management ownership corporation structure that there is a problem. So I don't want to out anything, but I won't use any specific examples, but the McDonald's on Acton Road, right off of 459 in Hoover, Alabama, that's probably the worst.
Pretty specific for not.
At 2427 Acton Road, Vestavia, Alabama, 35243. You've driven by it many times, going to and from, and because I know where you lived and I know where you worked, which you don't go to either of those places anymore. But that's the worst McDonald's I've ever been to, by far. And that's it stands out as the worst McDonald's in the climate of generally the general nature of how fast food restaurants are not fast anymore. And there have been a number I used to live that was the closest McDonald's to me, and I used to live there and I frequent it, and to the extent, it was bad to the extent that they had printed out pieces of paper on all the drive-through windows that said, if you have a problem, please contact so and so, and they had the general manager so and so, and it had their phone number and their email address. It was to the point where it's they really wanted you to contact them instead of, I guess, McDonald's Corporation. But I would say there maybe over a number of years, at least half a dozen managers that had that sign up in the window. And I can't imagine that was a good job just by the rate of turnover seemed pretty high. I don't have anything to compare it to, but the point being is it got to the point where it's they're not the problem. They're just being set up for failure. I think everyone who walks in that store to do a job is set up for failure. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but McDonald's is a pretty big corporation, and I can't imagine that their C-level executives aren't being compensated in the millions.
Well, I'm certain they are. Um, I don't remember where I heard it, and I don't remember how long ago it's been, so it may or may not be overly accurate anymore. But I know there was a fairly long stretch where what I heard was that for many of the predominant fast food chains, you were pretty much set up for failure by corporate policies, even if you were a franchise owner, relating to number of hours and number of staff and how you allocated them. And I can't remember enough about the details, but it sounded true enough at the time, just knowing, what I know about how corporate structures work. What I don't know is whether it was actually all stores or if it was just like including franchise stores or if it was just corporate run stores, since that can also be a distinction.
Oh, then there's the whole thing. Yeah, that definitely is. But then there's the whole first of all, franchise. I think on Last Week Tonight, John Oliver used Subway as an example of how terrible the franchisee environment is. And again, I think Chick-fil-A is the one that stands out as being a different, or being a bit better than the others, the situations of the other. But I remember. I'll see if I can find the YouTube, the link to the YouTube video where he talks about that, so you can put it for the show notes. But yeah, it just further shows that being, I can't remember, is it franchisee or franchise? Subway would be the franchisor, and somebody who bought a store would be the franchisee. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, these franchisees are being set up for failure, and again, Subway was used as an example of that, and I also remember a short documentary I saw on YouTube about, I think it was called McBroken, and it talked about how McDonald's Corporation purposely basically sabotage. I'm really, I'll my disclaimer here is that I'm really to not get into too much of the details of it. I'll send you the link for this for the show notes, but basically they sabotage their ice cream machines to extract money from franchisees.
So that wouldn't
as a revenue stream. And yeah. I think recently there was a judgment against McDonald's for that, and there was going to be some there's some ruling against them specifically about their ice cream machines. But there's a whole website called McBroken, and you can look and you can go and you can see which ice cream machines are working and which ones are not, and see when they were last updated by customers.
Yeah, I remember hearing about some legal action relating to that, and I remember hearing about a company who was taking it into the private sector as an independent company to repair things, showing how it could be done and done well outside of the scope of what McDonald's would do. And I don't remember all the details because I remember there being something about very limited operating footprint, I'm sure due to regulations in different countries and things of that nature. But I remember seeing something about relating to all of this not too long ago. I have a little bit of firsthand knowledge with a franchise, not an overly major one, but it was kind of what opened my eyes to why I would never want to enter that type of business relationship. So a good friend of mine worked at a place that was a franchise owner, was a decent guy. The shop he ran was decent. He treated his employees well. Food was decent, especially for something that was kind of in between fast food and sit-down restaurant type food. And so they did pretty well. And up until different things had to be updated or maintained, and the franchise tried to get too greedy and ended up going under. But because of the rules of the contract, as long as he continued to operate with the name, even though the franchise wasn't technically operational anymore, they still held the rights to some other stuff or something else and could make his life hell kind of thing if he didn't use the proper parts or the appropriate parts or didn't do something. I mean, there was just a lot involved with it. He eventually decided it just wasn't worth the headache and shut down. But and I think he opened up something else, but I'm not sure. I didn't follow him. At that point, the friend of mine was no longer working there, so I didn't follow the rest of the saga. But there was a lot there because I remember also being called out to take a look at some of their old point of sale equipment to try to get it functional because of the exorbitant cost of replacing it in order to make it work with the franchise systems kind of in the later stages before they went under.
Yeah, that's just...
Like, I really do. I understand the concept of, as a franchise, you want to protect your brand and you want things to be uniform and that kind of thing. But there's a big difference between doing that and being a money grab.
Right. Well, and or even just like if for some reason the franchisor goes under, and it's like, okay, it can't just be like plundering and pillaging. I mean, because that's what it comes to.
Right.
And so it's really frustrating, and there's just a lot of things like this that are really frustrating. And
it is interesting or maybe important to point out that there are some franchises who do a really good job of walking that line. So I don't want to say that all franchises are bad necessarily, but
no, I don't think you can.
I think you can say that the vast majority of them operating in the food space are not all that great.
I think you could say that as well, pretty confidently. And I also think that it's just a reflect. This is just a part of the late stage capitalist hellscape that we're living in today, and I'm just ready for it to fucking break. It's not great. There's
a lot with regard to, can I maybe just generalize it as our current economic system instead of just
Yes.
the capitalist landscape? There's a lot with our current economic system that I would love to see completely disintegrate.
Well, I think I would expect that all of the things that you are referring to would fit under this capitalist, because like the capitalism that got us here is not the capitalism that we have today. And I'd say, generally speaking, capitalism is amoral, just like the free market is amoral. You have good actors and you have bad actors, and then when you have a non-functioning, corrupt government that effectively allows our system to turn into a corporate oligarchy, yes, you're going to see these terrible actors, this huge resource disparity. And I didn't mean to take over your point, but I just feel like these are all interconnected. Like,
yeah, completely agree. I was going to let you run with it. I mean,
okay.
I have ranted about it in the past. I don't know how much more I could say without being clear that the way I summarized it before is that there's nothing necessarily wrong with a free market economy, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with a capitalistic model. What's wrong is when you have those things that are combined and they're unregulated. Any unregulated economic system is a problem.
Yes.
You can have bad regulation. Like I don't want to say that regulation alone is the problem, or the what's the word I'm looking for? The corrective mechanism, whatever that might be.
Well, that's the whole reason why initially the idea was that those that were meant to regulate were also internally regulated with something they like to call checks and balances.
Right.
that are
non-existent.
Existent on paper. There's just there's no accountability.
There's still some level of existence in theory.
Right.
It's just
paper.
Yeah. In all practicality, we've seen the elimination of those checks and balances over the past, we'll say, 12 years.
Dude, just look at the last 12 months.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus. But I do want to say something that, um, I guess I want to bring up one more bad thing and one more good thing. Um, I was listening to the most recent episode of the Accidental Tech podcast. It released today, and it's probably the most heated I've seen Marco and John arguing. And it's probably the first time I can clearly remember thinking, I think Marco is completely right about it. Like, I don't think John is totally wrong. I just think he's misguided, and Marco is 100% correct on what he says. And the topic was, it was a conversation about Tim Cook personally donating $1 million to the Trump inauguration. He and some other corporate overlords have donated that amount of money to Trump, and basically, to sum up, if you want to hear Marco's argument, it's the most recent episode as we record. I think, what is today, the 14th? So it's their episode 622. Anyway, basically, Marco's simply, his position is that, okay, regardless of the reason Tim Cook donated $1 million to the Trump inauguration, it's corrupt and it makes him a Trump supporter. Full stop. And John had a more I feel like nuanced is giving him a bit too much credit for it, but basically he's like, his job as a CEO is to make sure that his company makes as much money as possible, and that in turn, has a lot to do with how people are compensated and their retirements and so forth and whatever. He's not wrong, but it's also not right. And to be as generous as to be generous, you could say they have fallen into a system they created for themselves in which they have to worship at the idol of Wall Street and make as much money as possible and appease the Wall Street gods, and so that they can take care of their people. But also, have you ever gone to the Apple website and configured a computer and looked to see how much more expensive their fucking hard drives are? So
I have thoughts, but I wasn't sure how.
Go.
So I know Zuckerberg got a lot of heat about doing something similar. I don't remember. I think it was Meta that actually donated, not Zuckerberg directly.
Yeah, and I'll make a distinction that it was Tim Cook personally donated $1 million, not Apple. Apple is not donating any money to the inauguration. But I know either Bezos and Amazon, and then Space Karen, I can't remember, Space Karen donated. I don't know if any of his companies donated, but yeah, they're all just, winking him off.
But and where I was going with it, though, is that there have been a number of investigations into the big tech companies in general, talking about what they control and potentially breaking up different companies and all that kind of stuff, right? And I know I haven't followed a lot of that news because I really just don't care anymore. But I do know that in the near future, Meta's conglomerate is actually on the docket for, it's an investigation maybe, or maybe it's post-investigation findings. Either way, regardless, I know that there is something within the various systems at play for Meta. And it would not surprise me to learn that it's the same for pretty much all of these companies for various reasons. So you could also make the argument that these companies are trying to put themselves in favorable positions to keep their business models from being modified. And what I mean by that is, if you have Trump's support in our current failing government, you pretty much have whatever you want, because he seems to be able to push around everybody else however he wants it to happen. at least with regard to things that are not, well, there's a lot to be, that may or may not play out there that might change what I would say anyway. So we'll just say that at this point, he's unequivocally a driving force in controlling the political landscape across the entire range of what that means, not just the executive branch. And so you can make those types of arguments, and I have a feeling that that's part of where John's arguments stem from, because that would make sense. It's logical. You can kind of take an objective look at it from a business standpoint and say, yeah, this makes sense to try to follow. The problem I have with any of those arguments, though, is that they're flawed. They're operating as though business is separate from everything else within society, and it's not. And this is one of those rare instances where, as you've described it, I would be in complete agreement with Marco, because regardless of what you are beholden to, and regardless of what you were attempting to accomplish, your fucked up business practices are what got you in the situation.
Yes.
Like, I could care less whether you're trying to make it better or worse or anything else for yourself, or trying to say that you have to take care of the business to take care of the people. The fact of the matter is, you exploited people to get to where you are. Full stop. And so I have no sympathy for whatever happens to any of the tech companies with regard to any of those actions. And it is funny, to have me be that kind of staunch, I guess, in my position, given that I really don't want to see Apple have a lot of their things broken up, because there are reasons I value their business models. But at the same time, when you're charging that much money for a hard drive, you've pissed me off to the point where I don't care.
Yeah, it's yes. It's on one hand, you have artists over in Cupertino creating amazing products. And these products, there's so much conflict, because these products, not just Apple products, but specifically Apple products are, some aspects of it are ruined by the I don't know if price gouging is the right term, but for lack of a better one, price gouging on upgrades. And I don't know. That's problematic, but also I had somewhere going with this, and I got mentally derailed, and I apologize.
Well, I agree, right? Like, it's, to go back to my example, or kind of what I was mentioning, the App Store is the big thing for Apple that's going to be their downfall. And I really do like the App Store model. I really do. I like that it's a closed system. I like that they're gatekeepers. I like that, generally speaking, really, really, really nasty stuff is a lot tougher to get through than it would be otherwise. I don't like the revenue models and the split and the lack of flexibility for various things and all of the other stuff that are business policies that are attached to the development model, or development and distribution model. And that's where there's a break. So the operating system, I absolutely prefer Mac OS over Windows or Linux for a whole range of reasons. I love the fact that I haven't had to pay for an OS upgrade in a while. I really don't like the fact that there's absolutely no way to figure out what the fuck is going on if something isn't completing properly. And so there are these little things that make it difficult as an end user to be on board with the company as a whole, just day to day, not even talking about social responsibility or anything else. I like the push to being, at least theoretically, carbon neutral. You go and support someone like Trump, and I'm questioning whether I want to continue to do business with you. It's difficult because of those repercussions. At the same time, we're doomed to deal with Trump for 4 years.
Unless he dies.
Yeah.
I keep hoping and praying.
But if you look at it from a pragmatic standpoint of, well, I have 4 years of this administration to deal with. What can I do to make those 4 years better for me? There's a pragmatic aspect to it.
I do. I got underailed or rerailed I don't know, railed. No, I shouldn't say that.
Re-railed and railed both sound like bad innuendos.
Yes, they do. That's why I shouldn't. Anyway, I remembered, and that was like, it goes along with. It's like really fun to be. There are things that are made in this world, and they're really cool, but it's also really it's sullied by blatant consumerism. And I don't mean that, and I'm not necessarily putting the responsibility on the consumer, because it's whether it be the food industry and we can talk about the food industry being taken over by the tobacco industry once the tobacco industry was held accountable for their lies. They went ahead and bought food. They bought a food production company. If you look at all the parent companies of the largest, of pretty much any manufacturer in the grocery store, it's probably owned by a tobacco company because they decided to exploit the hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution in how we find what foods we find delicious and appealing. And it's you as a individual, as a consumer, you don't even have a chance because even if you're above average intelligence, you're up against hundreds of scientists and researchers that have designed a product to trap you. And it just, these are all puzzle pieces to the things that we've been talking about. And anyway, I would like to mention one level of decency, and that is in a story that resurfaced at the end of last month or so, was a story about Nintendo. The CEO at the time of the release of the Wii U, and I apologize because I don't know how to pronounce transliterated Japanese names, but I'm going to try to say it phonetically, and that's Satoru Iwata. He took a 50% pay cut because the first year the Nintendo Wii was on the market, it did not perform. And instead of laying off any employee, he took a 50% pay cut along with other C-suite executives taking pay cuts to make it through until they had, I think it was next year, they became profitable again. But that's what he did to not fire people, and that's admirable.
It's the way a company should be run.
Yeah. And then I looked to see up what his salary was at the time. It was in. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it was like something like $700,000. It was less than $1 million. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.
Do you have any new ankle updates?
Not
I was
really.
thinking about this yesterday.
Yeah, not really, because the next big update will be on the 22nd, when hopefully bandages come off, stitches are removed, and I have more reasonable use of stuff like the knee crutch. Because my whole reason with not using it much is because the way the straps fall and how much of my leg is bandaged, I just don't want to risk shifting stuff.
That's the decision I would make.
Yeah, and so I've limited myself to regular crutches and the knee scooter, and that's it. And I'm doing fine, but I think the knee crutch will open up a whole of a heck lot more things to do.
That's the peg leg, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you'd essentially be walking uncomfortably.
Yeah. But I quit taking the Percocet last Wednesday.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, they gave, I guess it was a week supply. I don't know. I had at least 2 or 3 days more left that I could have taken.
Save them for a rainy day.
Yeah, I'll hold on to them for a little bit. I've never been a fan of taking them long term though. I don't know why. Anytime I've ever been prescribed hydrocodone or oxycodone or any of those, I've always taken them for as short a time frame as I felt comfortable taking them.
Yeah, it's just it's the same reason you don't play with fire.
Maybe, and it may also be that I don't necessarily. I know that it helps quite a bit, but I don't necessarily get any type of high off of them either. And I think just a byproduct of how long or how many times I have dealt with pain that I probably shouldn't have dealt with before having it addressed. Like just pain tolerance is high enough that it's not a big deal.
I was going to say you strike me as a person based on who I know you to be and just general background story kind of stuff. You seem like you have a pretty high tolerance for pain. Also, some of the activities you participated in prior to surgery, as well as your whole approach to surgery and so forth. Yeah, you seem to have a relatively high tolerance for pain, or maybe above average tolerance for pain.
Yeah, I like to think so, only because it sounds good, but I also don't know if it's really a good thing.
It can be.
Well, with the ankle, I do think that it's helped. So that even though I came off or quit taking the Percocet Wednesday, over the course of Wednesday, Thursday, there was a lot of achiness in different ways. It didn't hurt necessarily in a way that I would be, oh, I've got to take something for it. But I felt more of my foot than I was feeling prior to that, is maybe a good way to put it. Which would make sense, right? Like I would feel more of the duller, more minor aches and things. And so that was kind of interesting. Over the past few days, I keep feeling aspects of the stitches more, and I think that's just the byproduct of, the whatever blood and plasma that leaked over the course of the first amount of time created whatever it created up underneath all that bandage. And
yes,
so there is whatever there is under there. And so I'm in that phase where like sweat or whatever could adjust how things feel, and how the bandage catches on things can adjust how it feels. And so I don't even know how many stitches I've got, or how many incisions I've got, or how big they are. Like I have everything under the bandaging is just an unknown. And
you have to come back with that knowledge, though.
Yeah. And so it's interesting to just feel all the things. But it's been all right. I had one instance of accidentally putting more pressure on the top part of my foot than I meant to, and that was uncomfortable. But I caught myself quickly and hopefully didn't cause any damage. So it's a lot tougher to keep all weight off the foot than you realize.
Oh gosh, no. I think also one aspect of this, and I don't think I'd ever really thought about this, but your body's actively pushing the stitches out. You can't see it on a day-to-day basis, but like after a few weeks, it's like, yeah, your body's healing. So that is effectively your body trying to push this, pushing up against the stitches.
Yeah. Which is why they intentionally make sure they remove them, and then they put the steri strips to keep wounds, the reopened portions of the wound, tight for the rest of the healing process.
Indeed, yeah. Wow. So will it be end of March or beginning of April when you start physio?
I'm 100% know. So I will find out all of the details next Wednesday, which includes what, rehab and all that stuff will look like. And the reason I say I don't know is it would not surprise me if we start with like some flexion or movement related exercises that are not, pressure related at all prior to the end of the 12 weeks, just to maybe start promoting flexibility in the tendon, But it also wouldn't surprise me if we don't start any of that until the end of the 12 weeks. So that's one of the questions that I have for next week.